Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi, friends. I hope this finds you in good health and secure, safe. Thank you. I'll remind you right off the bat, like and subscribe to help promote the channel and grow our Sangha. Do you remember our discussion about the Lotus method and the speed of light, which is actually the speed of causality? Yeah. We talked about 3,000 realms in a single thought moment. And just for the sake of running the numbers, what that looks like, the speed of causality or speed of light, 299,792,458 meters per second. So a moment is just, to round it up, 300 millionth of a second, which means that if we have 3,000 realms in a single moment, that means that in a second we experience, well, a number I can't even pronounce. That's how many transmigrations we're going through. 899, 377, 374,000. So what is that? 899,377,374,000 realms in a second. I mean, you can't even fathom that, right? So, again, just to reiterate, you're never in any particular realm. You can't exist in the sense, Samsaric sense, because, again, we talked about linear time yesterday, yeah? Your perception doesn't last that long. And so this is how you influence your state of being, right? You influence, with every daimoku, 900 billion realms, each second of your existence toward your full expression of potential. When you realize this is your Renge moment. This is your aha, yeah? And so that's the cause and effect. What we don't often talk about is the momentum of cause and effect. We say cause and effect happen simultaneously, but what we miss is that cause and effect, two labels for the same action, describe the moment beginning and the moment ending into the next moment and the next and the next. It's a momentum that we're talking about, right? Yeah. So, just a reminder, by the way, that little chart, if it's helpful, is a downloadable PDF on threefoldlotus.com. I just thought it'd be interesting to bring that up, a little reminder in the midst of all of this discussion about the nature of time and cause and effect and the way our mind works and whether or not we're perceiving truth as in Buddha-ness, the life of the universe, or whether we're still stuck in our ego thinking, I am in the Buddha realm. See, that's ego. That's not the goal. That's not Gohonzon. Gohonzon is leaving that behind and perceiving the much larger, broader, constantly abiding process, the momentum of the engine of life. All right, let's continue. Nichiren says, we see an example of this in the statement by the meditation master Daocho. Quote, the second reason for the difficulty in understanding the Myoho Renge Kyo is that its principles are very profound, but human understanding is slight, end quote. And for what it's worth, I'm constantly trying to uncover this, to point at it, to tell us our samsaric mind of identification and clinging and permanentizing is the very thing that draws a curtain It's like our samsaric mind is, you remember, I don't know, in school. See, when I was in school, they would bring film projectors in or opaque any kind of projector into the classroom, and they would roll down this screen, this silvery white screen, to project onto for us to see a presentation, whatever it was. And, now we have these projectors, just any flat surface you project onto. But I like the rolling down the screen because that's very samsaric. That's how we see the world, on this roll down screen. And the real perception of reality is like give that string a little tug and let that screen go and get out of the way. And that's what's going on. Yet another silly analogy for you to consider, yeah? But this is what he's saying. Honen says, quote, religious practices other than the Nembutsu do not accord with the people's capacities. Because, people, we need to pull that screen down so we can understand what the heck's going on. No. But that's the illusion they keep purporting to hang on to. They're just staying in samsara. They never get out liberated from the very things Buddhism is designed to do. And these are masters, right? Masters of controlling people, masters of power relations and social manipulation. They are not appropriate for the times, end quote, is what they say of the Lotus Sutra. It's too complicated. Don't trouble yourself. To combat such views, Nichiren continues, the 10th volume On the Words and Phrases, a commentary on the Lotus Sutra, I think that's Tendai, it might be Miao-Lo, but I believe it's Tendai, reads, quote, probably those who are mistaken in their understanding fail to realize how great is the benefit gained, even by a beginner, in the practice of the Myoho Renge-kyo. Don't lower the screen down to begin with. Just roll it up and see what happens. They assume that benefit is reserved for those who are far advanced in practice, and they disparage beginners. You can't possibly know. Well, isn't that ego? Huh? Isn't that arrogance? This is what Nichiren's pointing out. These people are not motivated properly. They're motivated by their own sense of importance. You can't possibly, it took me 20 years to do this. Who do you think you are? It ain't about that. It might take you a lifetime to get it. And this guy who barely reads may immediately get it. Because all of us already have the capacity for it. It just requires opening of the eye. Everything else is arrogance and ignorance and greed and manipulation and doesn't belong in Buddhism, yeah? Therefore, the sutra here demonstrates its power by revealing that practice is shallow, but the benefits that results is profound indeed. It doesn't mean the practice, it says shallow, but it's using that as a relative term to mean there's not much to it, really. Right? Anyone can chant, well, if they make the effort. And that's the key. What's your attitude? What's your intent? Why are you making this effort? What is it based on? Will greatly affect the depth, the profundity of your experience, your understanding, you're moving toward Buddha-ness, yeah? The great teacher Dengyo declares, quote, the former and middle days are almost over, and the latter day is near at hand. In his day, that was his place, his time, right? Now, indeed, is the time when the one vehicle of the Lotus Sutra will prove how perfectly it fits the capacities of all people. How do we know this is true? Because the Peaceful Practices chapter of the Lotus Sutra states, quote, "In the latter age hereafter, when the law is about to perish, accept and embrace the Myoho Renge-kyo." End quote. And Eshin says, quote, "Throughout Japan, all people share the same capacity to attain Buddhahood through the perfect teaching." End quote. Perfect for the time, perfect for the people's capacity. It's time. Now, which opinion should we believe, Nichiren continues, that of Daocho and Honen, or that of Dengyo and Eshin? The former has not a scrap of evidence in the sutras to support it. It's the person talking out of their quest, whatever we can judge it to be. Only they know what it truly is, but it ain't enlightenment. It's about them, the person, not the law. The latter is based firmly upon the Lotus Sutra, the law, the Myoho Renge-kyo. Moreover, the great teacher Dengyo of Mount Hiei is, for all monks throughout Japan, the master of ordination into the monkhood, the pursuit, the dedicated student, right? How could any monks turn their hearts toward a person like Honen, who is possessed by the heavenly devil, and reject the great teacher Dengyo, the master of ordination, the master of putting you forward, stepping you up? Yes? If Honen was a truly wise man, why did he not, in his Nembutsu chosen above all, mention the passages of explanation by Dengyo and Eshin, such as I have quoted above, and resolve the contradiction? Why? Specifically avoided it, right? He did not do so because he is the kind of person who hides the teachings of others. When the Lotus Sutra speaks of the second type of enemy, saying, quote, "In that evil age there will be monks," end quote, it is referring to men like Honen, who disregard the precepts and hold perverse views. Perverse why? Not because Buddhism is perverse. Perverse because they interpret it to benefit their status, their power, their cult. The Nirvana Sutra says, quote, "World-honored one, today I've learned the correct view for the first time. World-honored one, up till today, we all have been people of mistaken views," end quote. Miao Lo explains this by saying, quote, "They themselves referred to the three teachings they had practiced until that time as mistaken views," end quote. And the Great Concentration and Insight says, quote, "The Nirvana Sutra says, up till today we all have been people of mistaken views. Mistaken is bad, is it not?" I mean, this is starting to sound remedial, isn't it? The annotations on Great Concentration and Insight says, "Mistaken is bad. Therefore, let it be known that only the perfect teaching is good." Again, bad, good, evil, whatever, these words. But you know what all of this is saying, right? There is one ultimate teaching. There can be no question. All of the sutras and commentaries lead to this. Commentaries outside the scholarship of Buddhism, like Shan Wu Wei and others, manipulate the teachings and throw them around, taking advantage of the ignorance, the illiteracy, right? You can't go to Amazon and get a copy of this book, so let me tell you what it says, and outright lie in order to support their kingdom, their power, their cult, their group. It's the history of man. There's nothing new about it, right? It doesn't change the truth, though. It just shows you the greed, anger, and stupidity that human beings are capable of. Not only capable, but take advantage of. Yeah? There are two meanings involved here. Okay? First, what accords with the truth is to be accounted as good, proper, correct. And what goes against the truth is to be accounted as negative, bad, evil, whatever adjective you want to use, right? Obfuscating the truth. What good could there be in that? This is the meaning from the relative viewpoint. Second, sorry about that. Second, attachment to this viewpoint is bad. Interesting secondary point, yeah? And transcending it is good. Get unglued from that. Okay, you've been misled, maybe for a long time, but knowing that, you should easily be able to discard that, not keep hanging on to it and trying to drag it into new insight. No, just understand you've been misled. Now start over. Don't worry. Some of what you've learned will be useful, but not in terms of the way you learned it. Just let it go. And whatever good you manage to cull from it, it will immediately instantiate. Don't worry about dragging that old stuff along. Right? Don't look at it as a loss. Look at your opportunity now as amazing. This is the meaning from the absolute viewpoint. From both the relative and absolute viewpoints, we should abandon all that is negative, obfuscating, obstacle, distraction. To be attached to the perfect teaching is bad. Because then again, you're turning Buddha-ness into a thing that you own. This is where people get confused, yeah? And to be attached to the other three teachings is, of course, even worse. It's about being in the momentum, coursing with it, the truth. That's where enlightenment is. There is no enlightenment in saying, the other day I was chanting and I reached Buddhahood. So what? Where are you now? What good is Buddhahood if you're not experiencing it in the moment? That's what this practice is all about. It's not about claiming one more gold star. I know that can sound a little rough, but think about it. The goods and evils of non-Buddhist creeds, when compared with the Hinayana Sutras, all represent a bad way. Similarly, the good ways of Hinayana teachings and the four flavors and the three teachings as well, when compared with the Lotus Sutra, well, they're all mistaken and bad as well. If you stay stuck on them without progressing, you then are no better than anyone else. You're a religionist, you're playing at Buddhism. You're not actuating your enlightenment. The Lotus Sutra alone is the correct and good, is the method for instantiating the experience of Buddha. This is the formula, this is the law, the Myoho Renge-kyo. The perfect teaching of the sutras preached before the Lotus Sutra is so called from a relative viewpoint. From the absolute viewpoint, it must still be counted as bad. So, yeah, as you graduate from elementary school to junior high to high school to college, whatever, right? Every one of them has their pinnacle, right? But that pinnacle is relative. You've learned how to read and write. You now are enlightened? No. You are partially, you are on your way so that now you can enter the next evolution of your education and experience. And once you get through that, you then go to your next evolution. But once you get to the Lotus Sutra, that's it. This is what you've been working toward, but not accomplished. So one is relative, but the Lotus Sutra is the ultimate. This is what it's been about all along. Fundamentally, it falls into the category of the three teachings, and therefore it is bad in that sense as well. To practice the highest principles of the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, according to the sutras, is still bad and unfulfilling. It's only provisional. It's along the way. How much more so, then, is someone who would take a work of insignificant doctrines, like the Meditation Sutra, which cannot compare even with the Flower Garland and the Wisdom Sutras, as the fundamental teaching. Right? I've heard people say, the foundation of Buddhism is meditation. Read the Meditation Sutra. No, you've learned one thing. You've learned what a steering wheel looks like and how it works. That doesn't mean you can drive a car or build one, let alone repair one. You don't understand car. You just understand steering wheel. That's not the total picture. Such a person incorporates the ideas of the Lotus Sutra into the Meditation Sutra and urges people to ignore, abandon, close, and discard the Lotus and have confidence only in the Nembutsu. That is what Honen, his disciples, and lay supporters do, and they deserve to be called slanderers of the correct teachings. So they know the Lotus Sutra, they know the words of the Lotus Sutra, but they maintain that the Lotus Sutra just puts a stamp of approval onto the lesser teachings that they practice. That's why they're the best. What? Yeah, that's how easy you can manipulate ignorance. Take advantage of the desire to belong, to be part of. Don't follow the person. Follow the law. Shakyamuni Buddha, many treasures Buddha, and the Buddhas of the 10 directions came to this world to, quote, make certain the law will long endure, end quote. The truth. Honen and the other Nembutsu monks throughout Japan declare that the latter day of the law, the Lotus Sutra, will disappear before the Nembutsu. Are such persons not the enemy of Shakyamuni? Shakyamuni, many treasures, and the other Buddhas? Aren't they contradicting the very teachings? For their own gain? What else could it be? Follow the law, not the person. Concerning the third group of enemies of the Lotus Sutra, the sutra says, quote, or there will be forest-dwelling monks wearing clothing of patched rags and living in retirement, so on and so forth. They will preach the law to white-robed laymen and will be respected and revered by the world as though they were arhats who possess the 6 transcendental powers, end quote. Right? That's the third enemy. And the 6th-volume Parinirvana Sutra states, quote, there are also Ichantikas, who resemble arhats, but who commit evil acts, evil deeds, destructive deeds. Destroying what, by the way? See, all of this is a battle for the mind. And how to use the mind. How do you want to use your mind? To stay stuck, worried, anxious, or to be liberated, to be fully expressing your life. with the totality of life, in concert with life. Right? There are also arhats who resemble ichantikas but display merciful hearts. The ichantikas who look like arhats spend their time slandering the correct and equal sutras to the populace. No, you don't need that. No, that's just for exclusive elite people. Yeah. That's not good for the masses. Let me take my tonic. The arhats who look like ichantikas, on the other hand, are critical of the voice hearers and go about preaching the correct and equal sutras. They address the populace by saying, "You and I are all bodhisattvas." Why? Because each living being possesses the Buddha nature. But the populace will probably call such men ichantikas. So that translation there is troublesome, isn't it? Because we hear ourselves saying the same words. Again, though, you have to understand the context that this is being said. And I suspect the translation is pretty loose. But the context is the goal. Is why are these things being said? They're giving false praise to people so that they don't seek to go any further. That's an important context, isn't it? When I say that we are the bodhisattvas of the earth, I am mirroring the context of the chapter in the Lotus Sutra that predicts our advent. The bodhisattvas from beneath the earth is a statement of future bodhisattvas. Is that not who we are? Is that not who Nichiren himself claims to be the leader of? And is not Nichiren our leader, our mentor, our exemplar? Right? Who charges us with emulating his life acts, his practice, right? So you have to understand the context or you'll easily get confused. Partly because of the translations, yeah? The Nirvana Sutra says, quote, "After I've passed away, after the former day of the law has ended, and the middle day of the law has begun, there will be monks who will give the appearance of abiding by the rules of monastic discipline." Oh, they're great at following rules. But understand, that's not the purpose of Buddhism. Isn't to learn rules to be a good monastic disciplined monk. That's a stage of learning. But they will scarcely ever read or recite the sutras, and instead will crave all kinds of food and drink to nourish their bodies. Because we're accomplished, we're good, we know all the rules. I think I'll have steak. Yeah. Ego. They haven't learned a thing. Though they wear the clothes of monks, they know the get-up. They will go about searching for alms like so many huntsmen who, narrowing their eyes, stalk softly. They will be like a cat on the prowl for mice, and they will constantly reiterate these words, "I have attained arhatship." Outwardly, they will seem to be wise and good, but within, they will harbor greed and jealousy. And isn't that the context and the point that we keep making here? Forget outward appearances. What are the motivations? What is the attitude and the intent of these people? Whatever they're wearing, whatever they're saying, what are they after? And when they are asked to preach the teachings, they will say nothing. Because there's a conflict there, isn't there? It stops them cold. Until they resort to their rhetorical manipulations. Like Brahmins who have taken a vow of silence, they are not true monks. They merely have the appearance of monks. Consumed by their erroneous views, they slander the correct teaching. Simply by... You've heard the old proverb, right? By not taking action, you are in fact taking action. without teaching you what you're asking them for, they profess to be accomplished at, by keeping the truth from you, are they not in fact lying to you? Miao Lo writes concerning people of this type, quote, "The third group is the most formidable of all. This is because the second and third ones are increasingly harder to recognize for what they really are." End quote. And Tung Chun states, "The third part that begins, 'or there will be forest-dwelling monks,' deals with members of the clergy who pretend to be sages and use their positions so that they can act as leaders of all the other misled, wrong-viewed people." Right? They're not just people that show up out of a trailer park. They're people that are sanctioned as accomplished leaders, right? Blah, 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 blah. Members of the clergy. So they got the stamp of approval. You're one of us. But their attitude, their intent in teaching is simply to call favor and fame. It's not a genuine concern for your accomplishment of what they think they've achieved. Do you see how that circle counteracts the progress? It eats itself. Ego. As for these members of the clergy who act as leaders of all the other misled people, where in Japan at the present time should we look for them? On Mount Hiei? In Onjoji? In Otsu? In Toji, in Kyoto, in the temples of Nara, in Kenninji, in Kyoto, or Jufukuji and Kenchoji in Kamakura? We must examine this carefully, Nichiren says. Look around you. Look at these people who've been promoted through the centuries, through tradition, and propped up as the experts. First of all, your first question is, why are there so many sects? There is only one sect. There is only one Buddhism. Why are there 8 schools? How can that be? How can they all be right? Right? Isn't that an obvious question? Do the words refer to the monks of Enrakuji on Mount Hiei who wear helmets on their heads and are dressed in armor? Do they refer to the monks on Onjoji, who wear suits of mail on their 5-fold bodies of the law and carry weapons? But these men who do not resemble the monks, wearing clothing of patched rags and living in retirement, that are described in the sutra, nor do they seem to be the type who are, quote, respected and revered by the world as though they were arhats who possess the 6 transcendental powers, end quote. They're not men like the men of the third group who Miao Lo said are increasingly harder to recognize. It would appear, therefore, that the words refer to men such as Soichi of Kyoto and Ryokan of Kamakura. Even if they are identified as such, they should not hate others. If they have eyes, they should examine the sutra's text and compare their own behavior with them. They don't have the wisdom to be self-critical. They're just so full of themselves, right? The first volume of Great Concentration and Insight states, quote, there has never been anything to compare to the brightness and serenity of concentration and insight. End quote. The first volume of On Great Concentration and Insight states, quote, from the time when Emperor Ming of the Han Dynasty dreamed at night of the Buddha, down to the Chen Dynasty, when the great teacher Chendai lived, there were many who participated in the Zen school and received the robe and bowl that were handed down, end quote. The supplement to Tendai's 3 major works explains this by saying, quote, the handing down of the robe and bowl refers to the succession of Zen patriarchs from Bodhidharma on down. their traditional handing over of the helm of Zen. The fifth volume of the Great Concentration and Insight states, quote, "There is a type called Zen men, but their masters and disciples are blind to the truth and lame in practice, and both masters and disciples will fall into the hell of incessant suffering." Because they've created a ritualistic environment separate from the teachings of Shakyamuni to entertain themselves with, to give themselves pride. In the seventh volume, we read, quote, "There are 10 ways necessary for understanding and practicing Buddhism correctly." This should be useful. "Of these, except one, the 9 ways have nothing in common with the ordinary monks of the world who concentrate on the written word, nor do they have anything in common with the Zen masters who concentrate on practice. Some Zen masters give all their attention to meditation alone, but their meditation is shallow and false, totally lacking in the 9 ways. This is no empty assertion. Worthy persons of latter ages who have eyes to see will understand the truth of what I say," end quote. The 7th volume of On Great Concentration and Insight states, "Monks who concentrate on the written word refers to men who gain no inner insight or understanding through meditation, but concern themselves only with the characteristics of the doctrine." Right? They're playing at Buddhism. Zen masters who concentrate on practice refers to men who do not learn how to attain the truth and the corresponding wisdom, but fix their minds on the mere techniques of breath control. That's an initial learning step to become aware of your own mind-body samsaric preoccupation. Move on. Nope. There is the kind of non-Buddhist meditation that fundamentally still retains outflows. That's their meditations on breathing and on emptying the mind. They're samsaric activities. They don't transcend the samsaric existence. They fetishize it. Some Zen masters give all their attention to meditation alone means that for the sake of discussion, Tendai gives them a certain degree of recognition, but from a stricter viewpoint, they lack both insight and understanding. The Zen men in the world today value only meditation as the way to realize the truth, and they have no familiarity with the doctrinal teachings. In relying upon meditation alone, they interpret the sutras in their own way to justify their meditation only, yeah? They put together the 8 errors and the 8 winds and talk about the Buddha as being 16 feet in height. They lump together the 5 components and the 3 poisons and call them the 8 errors. They equate the 6 sense organs with the 6 transcendental powers and the 4 elements with the 4 noble truths. To interpret the sutras in such an arbitrary manner is to be guilty of the greatest falsehood. Such nonsense is not even worth discussing. So, sorry, Zen people. Whatever use there is to those teachings, they are only en route to much more profound understanding. Please leave that behind. It's holding you back. The 7th volume on the Great Concentration and Insight states, quote, "In the past, the Zen master of Ye and Lo became renowned throughout the length and breadth of China. When he arrived, people gathered around him from all directions like clouds, and when he left for another place, they formed a great crowd along the roads. But what profit did they derive from all this bustle and excitement? All of them regretted what they had done when they were on their deathbed. In the 7th volume of On Great Concentration and Insight, we're still in that teaching of Tendais, we read, the texts speak of the Zen master Ye and Lo. Ye is in Xiangchao, and was the capital of Qi and Wei dynasties. The founder of Zen caused Buddhism to flourish there and converted the people of the region. The great teacher Tendai, out of deference to the people of his time, refrains from naming anyone specifically. Lo refers to the city of Luoyang. The 6th volume Parinirvana Sutra says, quote, the extreme is impossible to see. That is, the extremely evil deeds done by the Ichantika are all but impossible to perceive. Or, as Miao Lo has said, the 3rd group is the most formidable of all. This is because the 2nd and 3rd ones are increasingly harder to recognize for what they really are, because they use all of the doctrines and words of the sutras, but in their minds, in their attitudes, their intent is to pull you aside to their cult, what serves their gains. Those without eyes, those with only one eye, and those with distorted vision cannot see these 3 types of enemies of the Lotus Sutra who have appeared in the beginning of the latter day of the law. But those who have attained a portion of the Buddha eye can see who they are. Quote, they will address the rulers, high ministers, Brahmins, and householders, end quote. And Tung Chun states, these men will appeal to the government authorities, slandering the law and its practitioners. Because when they see you practicing correctly, they will be intimidated, and they will use every political trick they can to quash you, because you're a threat to them. Now, if you're really pursuing enlightenment, and enlightenment for all, why would you feel threatened? That's a huge clue, isn't it? In the past, when the middle day of the law was coming to an end, Gomyo, Shuen, and other monks presented petitions to the throne in which they slandered the great teacher Dengyo, who, as we know, well documented, converted every other school of Japan, and it brought them to their knees, so to speak, in debate, so that they all honored Dengyo's authority, his elucidations, his preeminent insight in the teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha through the Tendai school. Yes, you understand the teachings far greater than we ever did or any of our teachers ever did. Dengyo, you are a great man, right? But as soon as he's gone, well, let's see, how can I get a piece of that pie? Now at the beginning of the latter day of the law, Ryokan, Nenya, and others drew up false documents. Don't tell me they don't know what they're doing. And presented them to the shogunate. See? Are they not to be counted among the 3rd group of enemies of the Lotus Sutra? Because they're supposed to be scholars. But Dengyo isn't around to go, that's bullcrap. So they present their own versions of the events and documents. Oh, I see. Interesting point. Well, Dengyo's not here to argue with you, so, you're really educated. I guess I'll take your word for it. Shogunate, right? Let me close with one short paragraph here. Nowadays, the teachers of the Nembutsu address the rulers, high ministers, Brahmins, and householders who support the Tendai Lotus school, saying, quote, the principles of the Lotus Sutra are very profound. Oh, yes, they're very profound. But our understanding is slight. The doctrine it teaches is extremely deep. Our capabilities are extremely shallow. We're just humble priests, just like you, right? Just as the Great Concentration and Insight says, they object that it pertains to the lofty realms of sages, something far beyond the capacity of one's own wisdom to comprehend. Let's not promote that teaching so much. It'll just confuse people. It's you got to be special for that. We have a much more populous, friendly teaching. Let us take control. Again, the men of the Zen school say, quote, the Lotus Sutra is a finger pointing at the moon, but the Zen school is the moon itself. Gee, when I look in the pond at the reflection of the moon, I don't see a bunch of you sitting on your asses meditating. I see the moon. Once one has the moon, of what use is the finger? Zen is the mind of the Buddha. Wow, that's a pretty grandiose statement. Shakyamuni never, ever said that the practice was the mind of the Buddha. The practice has always been a way of accessing through our samsaric physical existence a perception that is Buddha, right? The practice is a way of conditioning your mind to open to Buddha, not the practice is Buddha. There's that ego again. You see the line? It's a very distinct razor's edge line. The Lotus Sutra is the word of the Buddha. After the Buddha had finished preaching the Lotus Sutra and all the other sutras, he held up a single flower and through this gesture conveyed his enlightenment to Mahakashyapa alone. As a token of this tacit communication, the Buddha presented Mahakashyapa with his own robe, which together with the enlightenment has been handed down through the 28 patriarchs of India and so on through the 6 patriarchs of China, end quote. For many years now, the whole country has been intoxicated and deceived by this kind of falsehood. Like enlightenment, and you've heard me say this so many times. What you just heard was another way of saying that the Buddhahood that this guy perceived, he took it out of his head, his robe, his flower, whatever, and he handed it. Here's Buddha-ness. Now you're Buddha. What kind of crap is that? There's only one way to enter Buddhahood, to understand Buddha-ness, and that is to locate it within your own mind. No one can hand it to you. That's following the person. Do you see? So Nichiren is just, it's so obvious, right? He's just pointing it out. All right, I'm going to stop there. We'll continue. Nichiren's knowledge is entertaining, if not voluminous, and it certainly is voluminous. But it's so important, and I just want to close with this comment. Understanding the context of these dialogues, these writings, these sayings is so important, and it's very easy, especially when you're slogging through this text. It's very easy to start to latch on to the words themselves. They're quite entertaining, but you can't lose sight of the context, right? Why is he quoting these dialogues? Why is he demonstrating these earlier writings? He's demonstrating them to pierce through the veil of misunderstanding. But if you get attached to the words, then you're just following the misunderstanding. You're not getting the point, right? This is Chloe, my little girl. You see her nose is all messed up. Oh, I know. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for your practice. Please like and subscribe, right? Do it for Chloe. Do it for your practice, for your bodhisattva effort, right? Do it for your enlightenment. Use this resource. Use the search in the middle of the home page to look up keywords. Go to threefoldlotus.com. Your support is everything. Keeps us going here. Keeps me going, right? So I can access more materials, do more research. I'm always looking for interesting information. Not just, there's a lot of crap out there, as I'm sure you know if you've done any research. But I want to find authoritative stuff, and it's not easy to dig up. It's quite a rabbit hole. So if I find something authoritative that will add to our discourse here, to encourage your practice, and that's the bottom line. Stay strong in your practice. Have conviction. Know that this will bring about results. Right? Stay strong, stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one. All right? Chloe and I will see you then. Say bye for now, Chloe. Bye for now.
I like to be educated, but I'm so frustrated. Hello to my loneliness.